If you're going to watch this video until the end, I promise your trading journey is not going to remain the same again. Today, we are going to be talking about liquidity and 9 types of liquidity and how to trade them like a professional trader. Now, what is liquidity? Because this is really very important. And the reason this is important to us is because we have been discussing about options and futures, and we have been using that data actually to trade on the spot market. And our next goal that we really need to take this is even learn more about futures and actually learning about liquidity is actually going to be one of the best things that you're going to use in the future, and that's why we are going to be learning about liquidity. Now, what is this liquidity? Maybe for the people who are new to this, liquidity is the market that, of course, that is liquid, the market that is moving, the market that is not fixed at certain price or just moving around one area. Is a market, of course, that has willing buyers and willing sellers. We can talk about this because liquidity is really very important. If the market is liquid, then of course that market is healthy. It's just the same as when people talk about the stagnant water and they tell you, you know what, stagnant water is always poisonous. Then it is true, because the stagnant water is always poisonous, unlike the water that is actually flowing through the river. At least that one is really good, only if it's not contaminated. But there's one thing that we really need to understand on this, that liquidity is one of the best things that you can actually have. And when we talk about liquidity, some people actually have those type of myth when it comes to the liquidity. Sometimes people may think that, of course, like big institutions are really going to push the prices to ones where the retail traders are placed or where the liquidity is in order to hit the stop losses. That is actually a myth. And sometimes people think that liquidity is the market moves because it is searching for the liquidity. That is another myth that we normally have. So the market is not moving because it's going to find liquidity. There's another one that we are really going to understand this, although we are checking on the liquidity. But I want to say this, that you cannot identify liquidity with just observation on the chart, although we are going to be doing that. But at the end of the video, I won't be telling you how to advance that, because that is where we are still moving. So make sure that you watch this video to the end, subscribe to this channel, and comment below. Let me just know, umefikia wapi? Where are you right now in terms of what we have been discussing about options and features? Is really very important. Positive feedback is really going to be helping us here. Now, I was talking about, and today we are going to be talking about the buy side liquidity, because this is really very important. And we are going to be starting with what the steps of identifying and trading this liquidity, and this is the steps of trading all types of liquidity. And that's why we are starting with, we are going to start with the one type of liquidity, which is actually the buy side liquidity. What is this? I want just to trade it. And the first thing that you need to identify in any liquidity is to identify how is the market structure. How is the market structure of that market? How is the market structure? How is the market structure? So if I just look at this, for example, I look at this market, you see this is the market that, of course, moving up like this, and you can see at the top here, that is where we have some forms. Or for example, around this corner here, we have the market, of course. Around that area here, we have just a small rejection across that area here, another one across this area here, and on the last we have the market, of course, that is moving up from this corner here. But there's something, of course, that is happening across this area here, because you can see the market has actually moved above the rejection that here, which is actually above this swing high that we actually have about this area here. Now that is where it takes us to the next step. After identifying the structure, you know about the structure, we are talking about swing highs, swing lows, we are talking about the change of character, we are talking about the market structure. You know, all those things, market structure shifts, shift, where the market changes the direction. Those are sort of things that you really need to understand. But don't worry, in case maybe you don't understand them, you'll be getting them also on this video. And the next thing is actually to mark a liquidity pool. How do you mark a liquidity pool? How do you mark a liquidity pool? A liquidity pool is actually located above, is liquid, when we talk about actually on the buy side liquidity, is actually located above previous high, is collecting above previous high, all right, above previous swing high, all right. That is what we get. For example, the market actually might be moving like this, the one that you can just see here, like this, creating these eyes that you see here. And then generally the market, of course, is going to form and move slightly above this. And what you're going to see is the market now. How do you know that that was actually a liquidity pool? How do you know that this was a liquidity pool? Liquidity pool, what is this? A liquidity pool is a place where people have placed so many orders. Let's say, for example, there are some people actually like sold here. So if, for example, this is a support, remember there are some people expecting the support, this to be a resistance. So we have some sellers expecting the market to move down. So when they put this, they expect their stop losses actually to be around this area here. And that's how you see now their stop loss get hit. And that is why their stop orders are actually around this area here. We have other buyers, maybe you bought from this area here and they are going to be closing their position above this. We have some people who are actually doing their activity that is actually here is always tremendous, and that's why you can see now that is now what we call now the liquidity, and that is why it is really very important. All right, now all you just need to do now for you now to trade this liquidity is now to wait for this liquidity sweep. It's known as the liquidity sweep here because it is sweeping all the liquidity that is actually above here. All those people who have placed their stop losses around this area here, the market comes to take them. All right, the price comes to take them above the price, just as you can see, for example, on this chart here. For people who actually sold around this area, the market moves slightly above to take their stop losses, because you know, like this one, let me just put it like this so that you can just see it. Let me put a sell so that you can see what normally happens around that area here when actually people sell. When people's places sell, this is what happens. This is what happens. So this is what happens. So this is what some people will do when see this market actually behaving like that. They'll come and put a sell across this eye that we have here. Okay. So they'll put a sell here. They'll put a sell, a short position. They'll put a short position here across this area here. All right. And then what happens? They put their stop losses above here. They put their stop losses above there. And then what happens? The market sweeps them. The market sweeps them, and then it moves us to the next step, which is actually the liquidity sweeps. It sweeps the stop losses. Then it forms a very strong impassive candle, which is actually displacement by moving the opposite direction. So you meet, sometimes this is what the market actually does in this scenario. The market was moving like this and across this area here. That is what we expect, but of course the market sweeps it. This is around the liquidity sweep, what happened around liquidity pool, and then the market display. So this is what we call now displacement, because now the market does a very tremendous job by creating a very big displacement. All right, now what happens? Remember, we end those swing lows, these swing lows that we have here. Now what happens to this candle? It's actually very simple. You see, when you identify this zone that we really have here, then you notice that we have the change of character. That is, of course, the market that has now formed or moved slightly below where? It has moved slightly below the previous swing low, right? And that is where we get either change of character or market, that is the market swift that we normally get from that area here, which is actually MSS, or that is the market structure shift that we really have, MSS. That can happen. Right now, how do you trade this? Because now you understand there are two things can really happen here for you, because this is really very important. Two things on how to actually trade this. Number one, if this is actually not formed. If this is not formed, if the market actually does not form a displacement, therefore by creating FVG, all right, you can be looking for the underblock. But if the market is actually going to be creating FVG, of actually that is the one that is going to be very accurate, then all you just need to do is absolutely wait for this market to come up at least to this location here, of you can use either Fibonacci retracement and then short this market from this region and wait for a sell that is really going to be taking place. So this is going to be the sell point. All right, so let's see whether they can just see that on the same chart that we have here, because it's actually very simple. All you just have to do is, for example, we have seen this one, look at that. So what do we expect from this chart is we expect a simple thing to happen from this market, of which now is going to be a displacement. Like for example, this market is going to be forming a low that is actually going to be below this one, right? It's going to be below this, so you expect this market to move slightly below this. Okay, let me refresh this. Let me now look at that sweep that actually happened here. The market went all the way up. Look at this, the market went all the way up here. Therefore, so the mistake that you can absolutely do is actually by realizing that the market has actually swept and moved all the way up, and you think that is actually going to be the swing, the sweep that is going to happen, and the market is really going to be coming down. The mistakes that you're going to do is actually sell, because sometimes it can actually be a true breakout. All right, so this is actually a fake breakout that is actually going to take what? Liquidity sweep. All right, that is actually going to the liquidity pool, so it is taking all the up one stop losses. And then what is going to happen to this market according to us? And displacement, where we can get this candle actually moving, and it is supposed to move below the swing low, so that we can get what is known as, you are absolutely right, which is actually supposed to be below this, and the name is of course the change of character. So it's supposed to be moving slightly below this, so that we can get that. So let's play and see. Let's see. So look at that. Look at that. This is what actually has happened. This market, it has actually moved below this, which is actually this. And you can see this is actually a very big displacement. That means there were many orders across this area here that pushed this market and moved all the way down just like that. And that is what is known as the displacement. And this market has actually tended to create a gap around this area here. So all I just have to do now is come, as the market tries to move up, I come and create this region like this on the center of it. There's going to be a gap here, of course, but this is the gap that has been created here is of course market open, close open gap that has actually been created here. But of course, if you use even a Fibonacci retracement, you're going to see the same. You can take it all the way from the top, and all the way, you bring it all the way down, right? And then you're going to see the area. Of course, this is where we have 61%, the same region that I have actually pinged. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click a short there. So I'm going to place a short position. I'm going to click a short position right there, and I'm going to put it like this. okay, and then this TP actually should be below, should be in the next region that we have the buy sign, the sell sign, liquidity, and then I can just up like that. So you see how the market is actually going to be doing. It hit the entry point actually like that, and look at what happens to this market later. That is what happens to this market, and the TP is absolutely hit around this area here. So that is what is known as the liquidity. I will repeat again. Make sure that you identify the structure on how the market is just moving like this. Then after that, identify where they have the liquidity pool and see whether there is a sweep that took place, and then you're going to notice a very big displacement. Then after that displacement, you need to identify when the market reverses a retracement, where now you need to identify, and you can use Fibonacci retracement to identify a reversal. Then that is the area that you actually should be selling. Trust me, this you can actually practice this many times, and now we need to be fast because all these are actually very simple things that you can actually have on your trading. So let me get this to you. This is what you need now. When it comes now to the sell side, which is now on the sell side, liquidity is actually going to be another one which is actually going to be different. And here we are talking about, for example, a market that is moving like this. Assume this is how the market is moving, okay? And then around this area here, that is where we expect this market to actually move or reverse. But you notice this market create a sweep across this area here. So this is now a sweep. Then it moves to either a liquidity pool here. What confirms that is when we get a displacement. So displacement happens, right? Then we create what? The market create, which is called change of character. Then what do you have to do? You just wait for this market to reverse to this retracement here, and then you do what? You buy from here, expecting the price to move up. Right? Simple. The market is moving up, it swipes them below liquidity, it create this can actually be people bought from this and place their stop loss across these areas here. All right, we have different things that we can actually talk even about. They can actually be about the institutions placing their orders across those areas, because of algorithm and all those sort of things. So that is why we are talking about these areas here. So the market sweeps all this and forms a very big displacement candle, then wait for this FVG to buy across this area here, and the market actually moves up. So it's just simple like that. Now when we talk about the other one, which is actually very simple, we have what we have now, the equal lows liquidity. We have the equal lows, liquidity. This is what happens. This is actually the kind of support. We can actually talk about this axis support. So sometimes this is what the market does. So this is number 3. So you get the market actually getting to a certain area and the market reversing, okay? And the market reversing. It happens several times. It happens many times. So what happens? The market, of course, when you actually realize this, is the market can actually do something like that, all right, moves slightly like that, and then the market moves all the way to the top like this one, right? So it has actually moved above this previous high that we created here. Then what you need to do, of course, is to wait for this market to come down, and then you can buy from this zone as you wait the price to start moving up. So that is what you need to understand. You need to identify where we have these equal lows, and that is really very important. But sometimes even the market can break this without even move slightly below this and move all the way up. But just know, people who are buying from these areas, they're placing their stop loss slightly below this, and that is what normally happens. The market sweeps it and create a displacement, then you need to buy when the price becomes either 50 or retracement of that, and you need to buy from that as wait for the prices actually to start even moving all the way to the top. It is the same thing that you can actually find on the same thing, which is actually known as number 4. Is this number 4? Yes, on what we call now equal highs. Okay, equal highs liquidity. All right, equal highs liquidity. It's very simple. This is a market, of course, that is having resistance across this area here. The market tries to move, rejection. It tries to move, rejection. The market tries to move, and then we just get a rejection from that area here. And then eventually we get a displacement across this area here. Then you get to understand that we got liquidity from this area here. They can actually even move slightly below this, right? And then the market moves all the way, creating this change of character because the market has actually moved below that, and then what do you just get? You get the market actually revisiting this area here, and this is now our sell point. You see how these things are very easy? That's how now you get this liquidity. That's what you can actually identify on the chart. It's the same thing that number 5 on the type of liquidity that you're going to have, which is actually known as, you remember you actually follow the same path, which is actually known as the trend line liquidity. Trend line liquidity. Trend line liquidity. This is what happens to the trend line liquidity. Assume the market is, of course, moving in this way. Like, for example, the market moves like this, touches the trend line again at trend line. All right, now what happens to the market? There is something that happens from this area here. The market moves like that. The market breaks this. So when this market breaks that region, what happens now? We need this market now, this form and displacement. That means, of course, it swipes all through this and continues actually even to move below that. It continues even to move below that. It continues to move even below this. So what can we do with the market, of course, that has found so many sales points here? Then we need to wait for this market to come almost the same region, or this area here, which is actually the retracement here, and then we can sell for that market to actually move all the way to the top. Now this is what can happen again to this market. You can actually find the market is actually moving like this. All right, look at that on this trend like this. These are actually some of the things that I noticed that I normally hand to these strategies of the liquidity. This is actually on my own. This market can actually form something like this. All right, moves slightly. This is actually like a fake breakout. Remember, people were actually buying from this. The market actually breaks this and then takes the liquidity that is actually below this, and what happens? The market moves slightly above like that, and then change of character like that, and then all you just have to do is to wait, and then you can absolutely buy from this region as you wait for the market to actually move higher. So it's just matters of who are taking control in this matter when it actually comes even to the trend lines that we are really talking about. We have different types because these are already 5s. We have number 6, which is actually like internal range, which is actually the internal range. So the ones that we have really talked about, number 5 of them, they are the most useful one that you can actually, we can actually talk about. We have internal liquidity. This is the liquidity that normally happens internally, and that is for the market that is ranging up and down, the market that is ranging between in like that. I know you have seen the market that is ranging just like that, and this is the market that we are talking about. We are talking about swing high, swing high, swing high, swing low, swing low, swing low. These ones. All right. So there's liquidity here. There's liquidity here. There's this one here. But what I can just say, of course, this is just telling you. You just make sure that you can buy from that. All right. You buy when this normally happens, and it can actually happen the same thing that we saw with the trend lines, because that is what can happen here. We can be getting now the people now, because this is of course telling you that of course we have people buying from this and people selling from that. It does not actually mean like for example we might be getting from this, but as the market proceeds, you're going to be getting a breakout actually happening on this price here. And this is what can happen. This market can actually move very fast all the way down, all right, and that is actually be change or on that is what can really happen to this market. Then if the market actually forms a displacement towards downside, then it's what you need to do. You wait for this market to come across this area here, and then you sell from this point. Then what happens if this market comes to this area here, and then slightly I'll draw it again here. You wait for the, assume now I'm talking about this here, this market forms, this slightly moves here. This might be maybe a liquidity, or maybe these orders that took place across this area here, and then the market comes and moves all the way up. Then of course we need now to wait to buy, to have a confidence of buying from this area here. Now you understand how these things you really work, because this is really very nice, because that is what can happen to either internal range or the trend lines when you are actually working on them on the liquidity, right? We actually also have number 7, which is actually external liquidity. Which is actually external liquidity, and it is actually opposite of what we have actually discussed, which is actually the same what we have actually discussed right here. And the external liquidity can just happen. External liquidity can just happen the same way we have actually what we have actually almost done right there. So that is what can really happen to this price. Remember, the market can actually move to either both sides on this, because it is happening externally, but the internally is really happening between this point. You buy, you sell, you buy, you sell, you buy, you buy, you sell. But make sure that when you are buying and selling, don't buy and sell throughout all the days you're buying and selling. No, when it actually touches like even a 0.5 point, like let's say above 5 point, like 1 2 3 4 5th time, don't go to the 6th time, because there's possibility for the breakout that can actually happen. You need to be wise right there, all right? And you avoid when we have high impact news, because if that is the deal breaker, then of course you can get the market actually rejecting that or maybe breaking out. That is what you really need to understand. So that is external liquidity that we really talked about there, because they are all just the same. All right, now there's one thing that we need to understand, because these are the last two that we are going to talk about. I think it is number 8 and number 9. These are known as the previous day. We have the previous day, high liquidity, and previous day low. Okay, so those are the 2 things that you need to understand about this liquidity, about number 8. So these are number 8. Actually, number 9, I think we have session liquidity. We talk about that. Now, when we talk about this previous high and lows, these are the areas where people actually reference them, because what they are going absolutely to be doing here is, for example, assume now the price was moving. This is yesterday, and the market moved all the way to this point yesterday. Okay, if this market is actually going to be all that one, of course what the market is actually going to be doing, this is yesterday, you can actually write it here, yesterday high, this is yesterday high. This concept is very simple. This is yesterday high that we have. Okay, I can even write it. Let's say, for example, gold achieved $4,000. Okay, this is yesterday high that we didn't get. Then we get now the market that is moving today. This is the movement of today. That is what we get. This is what you get. Then you get the price moving to almost the same area here. Then you will get to understand that this is what happens. The market moves slightly below this, above this. Okay, it moves above, slightly above yesterday, because sometimes people treat this as rejection or resistance. Okay, then what happens? It sweeps all these stop losses here. Then the market forms what? A sweep. And this now is what happens. It forms the same thing that we have been talking about, displacement. It forms a displacement, change of character here, choice here. Then what happens? All you just need to wait is for this market to retrace back at least to 50% of this, and then you can sell from this. It's the same thing that you can actually apply. Go and try and draw the same thing to this one, or we can actually draw this, which is actually the previous low. Let's say, for example, this is yesterday previous low here. Yesterday, I write it yesterday previous low. Okay, this is what we achieved. And then today the market decides to move like this, you know, this one, and then the market comes to the previous low of yesterday. And then what happens to this region? People now start selling from this point, and then the market swipes their stop losses, and then the market displays and move all the way up, creating this, forming a displacement, change of character here. And then we wait for this market to move at least Fibonacci of this, all right, retracement, and then we buy as the market start moving from this area here, and we wait for the market to buy all the way up. All right, so number 9, we have what we call now, this is number 9, we have what we call now the session liquidity. All right, now I want you to post for me on a session liquidity, how it works, how you trend it, because it's actually also different. Go and search and tell me how the liquidity, or if you just know about it, post down below and tell me how the liquidity, how the session liquidity works. We have now identified the types of liquidity and those sorts of things. How do you know that is actually a true volume? Now you can actually opt to options, that is the open interest, to the previous video that you've been learning, to know where actually big orders actually been placed in terms of real data now. Because yes, we can actually check this on the chart, but you need real data. And the second thing that you can use, you can actually, first of all, saying go to the CME, you can get those open interest, check the videos below, and also you can go and check the DOM, that is the depth of the market. Is actually going to be showing you where we have the pending and orders were actually being placed in this market. All right, or the heat map, all those sorts of things are going to be showing you the number of orders that actually been placed on the chart. If you love this video, then make sure that you follow me, comment down below. Was that really easy? It was actually very easy. And now just to trade it on the section, we can actually take even another 1 hour on the next video to identify all these zones, and we can actually go and identify, we can actually, when we identify this, we are going to name it either session, internal, all those types of liquidity that you're going to be getting from the market. So keep practice from there, and I'll see you in the next video. Follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Dan Aurex. Bye bye.